Homeward bound in the grey, Freehouse and Silver Charm. Sharpcat can find no more. Hello and Steel Ruler, but it's Freehouse in front with 50 yards to run, and it's going to be Freehouse. Silver Charm comes right back at him. They run to the wire again.
There's just nothing like it. I mean, winning a race is the greatest feeling in the world, and especially a big race. Well, they're all fun, but a big race even more so. I mean, there is no greater feeling.
It's an experience like no other. Ask anyone who owns a thoroughbred racehorse, and they'll tell you that nothing can match the pride of ownership, the thrill of winning your first race, seeing your colors on your horse as it charges toward the finish line. Thousands of fans thrilled to the spectacle of thoroughbred racing, but a select group, the owners of these magnificent animals, experience the sport on a more personal and gratifying level. Owning a racehorse will take you to a different world, one of travel and adventure, exciting new friendships, and lasting bonds. Watching your horse win is a thrill like no other in the sporting world, whether you win at the local track or win the Kentucky Derby. We're going to introduce you to some people who experienced the thrill of owning thoroughbreds. You'll meet Robert and Beverly Lewis, who won the 1997 Kentucky Derby with the modestly bred Silver Charm. Penny Chenery, whose family owned the immortal Secretariat. Singer-songwriter Burt Bacharach will tell you why owning thoroughbreds gives him so much satisfaction. And John Toffin will tell you about his Cinderella horse, Freehouse. In addition to these winning owners, you'll meet other successful people in thoroughbred racing. Trainers Bob Baffert, Richard Mandela, and Nick Zito. Keeneland chairman Ted Bassett and top veterinarian Larry Bramlage will share their knowledge. Other experts will tell you what you need to know to become involved in this great sport.
That one win, just that one time, and you get to the winner's circle. Beverly and I were fortunate enough to win with the first horse that we ever ran right here at Hollywood Park. Lafitte Pinkai was the jockey, and the horse was named Sunshine Machine. And he came down that stretch, and I'll tell you, there was no greater thrill. We were hooked. We loved the business, but I'll tell you, that really turned us on. When we had the first time that experience of going to the winner's circle, well, you never forget that. And going back today, whether it's a claiming race or an allowance race or a big stakes race or a classic, it's just as invigorating, and we're just as enthused about it today as we were 8 years ago.
Owning thoroughbreds is the most exciting thing I've ever done. It is tremendously exciting and fulfilling, and also very scary, and it's a great challenge. You pick out people you like and horses you like, and learn as much as you can and hope you find success. It isn't that you're trying to earn money. This is not the reason to be in the thoroughbred business. You want to do it because you find it exciting, because it's a challenge, and because you like horses, because you like horse people. There's a camaraderie among people that are horse crazy. And you may not start out being horse crazy, but when you hang around people who've devoted their lives to it, there's something very contagious about that feeling.
Well, these are extraordinary animals. They're just beautiful. It's just such a pickup. I mean, such a lift. And you get up, you get dressed, and you're going to go to the racetrack to see your horse run. And it just it puts a brightness on the day. For me, it's always been one of the few things that took my mind off of music. I could just be having a tough day at the piano or whatever your business is. And you go to the racetrack and see your horse run and hang out with jockeys. They're terrific. Hang out with trainers. They're a different world than what most of us really get exposed to in there. And they're interesting. You can learn from them. And there's nothing quite can compare with having a horse that wins a race, whatever kind of race it is. I always thought if I could just one day I had enough money and buy myself a racehorse. And it was a dream that I hadn't, and you know, it came true.
In addition to the thrill of winning, owning thoroughbreds provides other sources of enjoyment. Perhaps most important, there's that special magic that is the horse itself. There's the magical world of the racetrack at dawn, where you can watch the sun come up and watch your horse train at the same time. Racing is the shared enjoyment of owning horses with your family and friends.
Well, I think for most people it starts with the horse. For me, that's the most important factor. There's something very compelling, almost childlike about horses. It's something that starts, I think, with me from the time they're born, all the way through their early years till they get to the racetrack. I don't know any thrill like watching a baby, a 2-year-old, walk out on the racetrack for the first time to go to work. I've been in this business a long time, and I still get a lump in my throat.
Going out to the track in the morning and watching the horses work is exhilarating, because the jockeys are in the work clothes, the horses are in a work mode, there are a lot of them, there's nothing organized that you could necessarily see, but you get to see the way different horses move. And I'm not a fan of sunrises, but I've gotten better about it. It can be simply gorgeous, and very often the coffee's good, and you can find yourself talking to somebody else who's just leaning on the rail watching the horses go by, and that's really something that you can indulge in long before you buy horses. Just go out and see how it all goes, and see if you like the atmosphere.
It's something that Beverly and I can do together. And after 50 years of marriage and raising 3 children and now having 3 grandchildren, it's just wonderful that we can find an avocation that we can both be so enthused about and so thoroughly involved in. We love the industry, we love the social aspect of what goes on, and the camaraderie of everybody in this industry. This is a marvelous fraternity of people, the thoroughbred industry.
Owning a racehorse involves an element of risk. As with any business, it is important to be prepared before you make your first purchase. Do your homework and learn as much as you can.
I think the first step would be to avail themselves of much of the reading material. The trade publications that we have, the Blood Horse, the Thoroughbred Times, the Daily Racing Forum, of trying to develop some sort of knowledge and expertise prior to entering into purchasing the thoroughbred. One of the finest opportunities that a neophyte, a new owner that is anticipating entering the thoroughbred industry, is to attend one of the TOBA owner-breeder training sessions, where they bring knowledgeable experts in from all over the country, the trainer, the veterinarian, other owners and breeders, to explain their experiences. And it gives a neophyte, a person first entering the thoroughbred industry, an opportunity to ask questions without any feeling of reservations of embarrassment, and it's an extraordinarily informative and productive experience. And I would recommend the participation in the TOBA training and owner-breeder sessions across the nation as one of the first things a new owner or breeder should consider. Probably one of the most important things that a person should do getting into the thoroughbred business in the beginning is to have a budget. And what sort of expenses is he expecting to incur, and what sort of commitment would he make financially? You know, there are many heartache and headache in the thoroughbred industry, and you have to be prepared for those downsides. But I think a sensible financial program outlining the budgetary requirements would be essential.
The most important thing is to decide on an amount that you want to invest. Stick with that as best you can. Go with professional advice. You can always go back in if you find that you like it and you want to participate at a higher level. There are 35,000 horses every year, and so I think it's important to know where you want to get in on this business and stick with your game plan. If you like it, then go back and have another go at it. But I think caution would be my keynote advice to anybody who was prepared to start in this sport for the first time.
One of your most important decisions, perhaps the most important decision you make, will be selecting a trainer. Interview several trainers. Visit their barns. Watch them as they saddle their horses before a race. Before you entrust your horse to a trainer, make sure you have compatible goals and that you can communicate openly and honestly.
Selecting a trainer is primary importance, someone that would follow the program that this individual has and giving the attention and the care and the guidance that's required.
I would advise a new owner to take a little time and do their homework. And what I mean by that is go to the races, go down to the paddock, watch the horses saddled, watch the intermingling from the way a trainer does his business, and more important than that, hang around the barn area in the morning and go by the barn and see how the barn runs and how efficient it is and whether it has a rhythm to it. With that, meet enough people, you'll develop a chemistry that takes over with with somebody that maybe would be long-lasting.
Well, I think like anything, like in business, or if I think the chemistry has to be there. You have to be very comfortable. You want to be able to go out with, to me, I have to feel very comfortable. Like when I've met owners, and I can tell within the first 10, 15 minutes, and after you've talked to them or whatever, this is not going to work. It just, some people have different ideas, and a lot of them try to bring in from their own business sense into this game, but it doesn't work in horse racing because it's just totally different. There's so much luck involved, and you just need to, you have to have mutual respect for each other. Because if you don't have that, when you do get a good horse, a lot of owners, they change, and they can go nuts on you. Make sure you hire the guy that knows how to call the right shots.
Search out your trainer, and really, trainers they would find are so receptive and so eagerly looking for the opportunity to seek new clients and find new clients and one thing or another, and they will accept your interview, or you can go to their barn and visit with them, and they'll tell you what their procedures might be. And it's, I believe, necessary to use your own instincts and know that you're comfortable with that person, that you have a good chemistry relationship, and if they qualify in that regard, then you might also look into their background and their record.
You have many options available when it comes to ownership. You can buy young horses at the sales. You can buy horses privately. You can claim a horse at the racetrack, participate in a partnership, or even breed your own. Cott Campbell, president of the successful Dogwood Stables, and other experts discuss your options.
I think first they ought to determine whether they're interested in breeding or whether they're interested in commercial sales, producing for the market, or whether they want to race. And then I think, again, if they want to see their own colors, if they want instant action, then maybe they ought to claim a horse, buy a horse that's ready to run. If they're interested in shooting for the moon and they've got a lot of money, then they ought to get a bloodstock agent, go to the sale, buy some high-class stock. Or if they want to feel their way into it, perhaps be involved in a partnership or a syndicate, which is a good way to get your feet wet. Somebody else calls the shots, but presumably if that person is reputable and knowledgeable, you're in good hands, and you You learn about the business in that way. With the dogwood partnerships, the average share price for a fourth of a horse is about $30,000, and it ranges from 20 up to 75. I think other partnerships have bigger groups and smaller pieces that are available, and I suppose anywhere from 15,000 on up.
Well, there are two schools of thought in entering the thoroughbred business. Some think that purchasing a yearling and having the control of the breaking process and the early formation of bringing it on into the racing field is important. Others feel that the 2-year-old and training sales, you eliminate some of the risk of the yearling, and you have at least reached a plateau where they have developed some sort of technique of ability to perform. Breeding of your own, of course, is the great challenge of making the matings of your mare and the stallion, of the pride of ownership, the pride of seeing the yearling develop, the naming process, the selection of a trainer. All those things are exciting ingredients that make racing such an interesting and challenging avocation.
Many successful owners got their start buying horses at auction. John Toffin and Robert Lewis talk about how they got started.
We've been involved for about 9 years now, and we started buying 6 yearlings at Keeneland in 1989, I guess it was. And 4 of them turned out to be stakes winners, and I guess we've been at it ever since.
When we got in it in 1990, we purchased our first horses at the Barrett's inaugural sale in 1990 here in Southern California, in Pomona, California. And then we went on and made some purchases in 1991 at Keeneland. And we also bought some horses in those at that time privately. And so we have kind of participated in every aspect of buying yearlings. We have even bought some weanlings, and so we've kind of experimented in every aspect. But I think buying yearlings is and determining that athlete, which really the trainers do that, and of course with our approval and all. But they're the people who have brought us to the forefront in that regard, as far as having some champions are concerned.
You have to buy yearlings, young horses, if you want to compete. Like for the derbies or get a good horse. I've always told everyone, you have to buy the young horse, the yearlings, because that's where you can get them at a, you can buy one. I've bought really good horses. My first thoroughbred I ever purchased, which you have to be lucky, was 30 Sleuth. I bought him for $30,000. He won a Breeders' Cup Sprint. I have owners that just want to claim cheap $20,000, $10,000. They want to have fun. They want to have a horse. They can bring their friends out, get their feet wet. And then I have owners. That will come up to me and say, Bob, I'm tired of these claimers. Let's go out there and find me one. If you find one in about 40, 50, or 150, 200. So I'm out there looking all the time. I always have like a little, when a horse comes by, I'm always getting videos in the mail. People want to sell me horses. That's how I found Silver Charm. I found a lot of good horses.
Well, the total newcomer, again, has to, that's his choice, because once this game is very expensive, and a lot of people forget that you could participate on this game on a very high level and a very low level. So it really doesn't matter. You don't have to be John Paul Getty to own racehorses. You could be the guy next door, and you can own an inexpensive horse. That's what makes the dream so great.
Once you've decided to buy a racehorse, you've probably realized that the learning process never ends. When it comes to pedigree and conformation, even the experts find they still have much to learn. Remember, don't be intimidated and never be afraid to ask questions. The study of pedigree can be like learning a new language. A pedigree is a horse's family tree. Pedigrees can provide insight into a horse's potential, its physical characteristics, and its value. There are many, many theories about pedigree. As you'll hear, there is no foolproof method about coming up with the right mix.
We'd like to think that pedigree is the foundation, that it is always going to stand out and be the most important ingredient, but this is not an exact science. And if it was, we wouldn't be involved in it because it would be controlled by a very, very few people. And so it's a wonderful ingredient.
When you're looking at a pedigree, what you're trying to understand is the physical characteristics of that horse. When I see a name in a pedigree, whether it's the first, second, third generation, what I want to know is as much about the conformation as possible, because that's essentially what it is. Pedigree information is conformation information. It's racing quality. It's distance information. It's such a big subject. There's so many different horses around the world. It's very difficult to know all that you want to know. That's why there's this study of breeding, the compatibility of influences, and that's really what it is, in my opinion. Is that when you're finding a cross that is seemingly working, it's because the qualities are compatible. I would say the most important things about matings is get good advice, but don't go to too many people so that you confuse yourself. One very important thing is keep it simple. Don't have a highfalutin idea. Don't have ambitions beyond what is really possible. You're trying to do the logical. And avoid the obvious mistakes. That's another key thing. And just keep up to date, keep abreast with what's going on.
One of the very seductive things about the horse business is trying to find the formula for success. And I'm afraid in my 25 years in the business, my conclusion is there is no formula. There's a lot of hard work, a lot of graft, and a lot of thinking that has to take place before any moves take place. And pedigree is one very important aspect of it that requires a lot of thinking and requires a lot of serious logical thinking, and not just playing with numbers and coming up with formulas that that really aren't the answer. When I started getting interested in pedigrees, what I did was I started reading stallion registers. I got the California Stallion Register, the Blood Horse Stallion Register, and I would look through the pedigrees and try and learn what I was looking at that way. Like pedigree, conformation is a key component of the horse. Conformation is how a horse is put together. No horse is perfect, but the better the conformation, the more likely a horse will stay sound. As you become more familiar with thoroughbreds, you'll develop an eye for good conformation and what faults you should avoid. These experts give a brief overview of how to look at a horse and what to look for.
Conformation is a game of angle and lines. The straighter the angles and the straighter the lines, the less likely a horse is to have soundness problems. Of course, there are many good horses that do have soundness problems, that do have poor conformation. Nonetheless, this is a game of increasing your odds of having a sounder horse, so you want to see as good, straight conformation as possible. In general, you like to see a horse with good balance, a beautiful head, a beautiful eye like this horse has, good length of neck as compared to the length of his back. He has a lovely shoulder with great depth and about a 45-degree angle from the point of the top of his shoulder down to the point of his shoulder here. He has good length of back from here to here, and a very long hip from the point here to the point of the buttocks. As you can see, he has a very strong gaskin, which is this area, the long muscle from here to here. His hind leg is set on fairly well, with a good plumb line down from the point of his buttocks right down to the bottom of his ankle. In front, from his forearm, he has good muscle definition in the forearm through here and here, and his knee is set on very well. He is neither back in the knee, nor is he forward or over in the knee.
I usually start with the head. He's got a nice head, good length of his neck, flows into his shoulder, got nice length of his back. Stand, little man. And I'll take a quick look at the front. Looks like he's a little bit offset in both knees, more so on the right, which I realize where it's coming from in the pedigree. It's coming from Riverman, and when I recognize the source of the fault, I don't worry about it too much. Riverman was back at the knees and offset at the knees, but was one of the greatest sires of recent times. I think he's sired over 100 stakes winners. He's broodmare sire of over 100 stakes winners.
As you learned earlier, it's crucial to have a financial plan if you want to race or breed. Although thoroughbred racing can be financially rewarding, Some horses end up costing their owners money. It's important then to be aware of the day-to-day costs of ownership and the setbacks you might encounter.
Buying the horse is the simplest thing you do. That's the easiest money you spend. Keeping that horse after you've expected it will start as a 2-year-old and it bucks shins or has a sore throat or can't start or something more serious happens and they're sick for several months, you still have to feed them. So you have to be realistic as to how much exposure you're willing to submit to.
The upkeep has to be explained at length because that's the hardest thing. The upkeep is the daily cost of a horse. You have to take care of the horse because it takes a lot of people to take care of one horse even. And if you do it right and you make sure they're housed right and they're taken care of every day, it's an expensive thing, and it could come to between $25,000 and $3,000 a month, one horse. So basically, whether it's a claiming horse or a good horse or whatever, that's the price. It's a very expensive game.
But to take care of them right without cutting corners, it's like $2,500. But I charge the same thing for a $10,000 claimer as I do for Silver Charm. I mean, it's just the same price. There's no different prices. I should charge more for Silver Charm because, you know, it gets those extra cares.
As with any business, owning thoroughbreds comes with some risk. Top equine attorney William T. Bishop tells you why it's important to have insurance and to get guidance from a lawyer and an accountant. He also discusses the various types of business entities used for racing and breeding.
Owners have some risk in buying a thoroughbred horse. Thoroughbred horses are animals that cannot always be controlled, and there are some inherent risks in the game. So owners need to be aware of that and determine with their lawyer probably and their accountant what sort of entity they ought to take ownership in and reduce their risks as much as possible. Many people do race and own horses in their own name and basically insure their risks. You can incorporate, and those corporations can elect subchapter S status so that you can be taxed as a partnership. There's a new legal entity called a limited liability company, which offers a lot of advantages as well and also offers limited liability. Well, the basic contract is a bill of sale for the acquisition of title to the horse. There's a lot of confusion in that area with respect to jockey club certificates, and some people think that is a title document, kind of like a car title, and that's not really the case. It is evidence of ownership, who has possession of the jockey club certificate and who is shown as the owner. But it's only that, it's some evidence, and you really need a chain of title. You need a bill of sale from someone. It needs to be in writing. It's a fairly simple document, but it's one you ought to be sure you have before you purchase a horse.
When buying a horse at public auction, Bishop tells you why it's important to read the conditions of sale carefully in the catalog.
At each auction, public auction, there will be a catalog, and in the front of each catalog will be the conditions of sale. They are clearly binding on all parties interested in that sale, and they are very important. While they will not be word for word the same at each sale, there will be a large degree of similarity between the sales. About 90% of them are virtually exactly the same, and there will be some variance from sale to sale.
Thoroughbreds are bred to race, and most do just that. A fit and healthy thoroughbred can race 8 to 10 times a year. For all their power, though, thoroughbreds can be fragile creatures. Dr. Larry Bramlage, who cares for some of racing's biggest names, talks about what makes these horses unique and what the owner can expect in the way of setbacks.
These are athletes that peak at such a high level, and there's so many things that keep them from peaking, either physical, psychological, bad luck. Sometimes it's just they have no talent, just like some of us. So when you start out with a horse, everyone hopes that you have a champion, but there's disappointment in the fact that not every one of them turns out to be as good an athlete as you would hope. And some of them that are wonderful athletes just have trouble getting the right place at the right time. The tendency is to compare horses to people because they compare them to their own experience. In people, our rate limiting step, the thing that has to limit, that we have to change the most as we're training to become more fit, are our heart and lungs. Now, we certainly get musculoskeletal injuries. We stress fractures and sprained ankles and any number of things. But in the horse, the heart and lungs are so wonderful that their biggest group of injuries all involve the musculoskeletal system. And they're so wonderfully adapted. They're very light but very strong, and those bones that allow that to happen have to accommodate to a very large degree while the horses are going from the untrained yearling in the field to the trained racehorse in the starting gate. And when that happens, there are little nagging injuries and in rare instances more severe life-threatening injuries that can happen. And so I think you have to be aware of that. The disappointing thing sometimes to owners is to have to keep stopping for these little things that keep cropping up. It's sort of an impatient sport because the horses grow so much faster and are adults at 3. We have to bring them along quite a lot faster, and it's not like watching a child grow up where they go from 10 to 20 and they're making that maturing stage in 10 years. These horses are going to make it in a year. Everything happens a lot faster, and little things can go wrong during that time that interrupt that training. So I think you have to realize that when you're training a horse, the rate limiting problem will be getting his skeleton there to where it can carry all that energy.
The injury factor is something that no one can anticipate, and it certainly is a source of disappointment, but that happens almost in any field of sport or endeavor. But that probably is the one most crushing one to an owner when he sees his own horse suffer a career-ending injury.
To the newcomer, the racing world can seem like a foreign country. You'll hear terms like fractions and condition book and wonder what they mean. There are claiming races and there are classics, sprints and routes. But as you grow comfortable with this new world, the language of racing will become like a familiar friend.
You walk into a racetrack, and this is many years ago, but it hasn't changed that much. There's no arrow that says, go here. There's no place that says this way to the track. There are directions for clubhouse or grandstand, but if you don't know which one you want, you don't know how to bet, you really don't know what you're there for. You have to be prepared to be the tourist and ask dumb questions. The greatest thing that happened to me was when I finally changed Dad's old trainer and got a young man. He didn't mind that I asked dumb questions. Because there's so much we don't know. I didn't know what a claiming race was. I didn't know what the fractions were. I didn't know, because racetrackers talk in sort of a telegraphese. They talk about the time of a work in minute and 2. Well, what? There's so many things that you just don't know, and you've got to treat it as an adventure, as if you've gone to a foreign country, and this is new language, and it doesn't come with a very good guidebook, and just go along and pick up the lingo as you can. And I think most tracks now have information people, uniformed people that you can go and ask dumb questions of. And they will have beginners windows for bettors, and some people don't like to admit that they're beginners, and so they won't patronize them. But there are resources, because everybody has gone through this process the first time they went to the track, unless they went with a relative or someone who taught them as they went. And reading the racing form takes time to understand what all that information is and learn to compare it. That's what's worth it. If you just want to bet numbers, you can play roulette. The charm about racing is that it is an intellectual challenge, and the charm about betting is, can I figure out more from this information on the printed page, or what I can gather from looking at the horses? One of the best things about going to the races is going to the paddock and looking at the horses as they're saddled.
No matter how well you've prepared yourself, no matter how well your horse is trained, racing still contains an element of luck. You can't win every time, even if you know you have the best horse.
One of the things you do have to recognize, you can't win every single time, unfortunately. So that you have to accustom and brace yourself to the fact that because of not having that certain amount of luck today, for whatever reason, your horse doesn't get out of the gate properly, or gets bumped in some way, or doesn't take to the racetrack that well, or whatever it may be. Maybe the horse just doesn't feel that well that day, and therefore doesn't perform in as the typical manner that you might hope for. But if you school yourself for that and recognize, and then can have the good fortune of winning 10, 15% of the time or somewhere in there, and you may not achieve that.
We know that there's only 9 races a day, there's 9 winners and a lot of losers. The degree of losing goes from second to last, so it doesn't mean you lose completely, but you have to go into the game knowing you won't win them all. There's no question about it. You happen to win a small portion of what you attempt to win, but you can have years you don't win anything, and then other years you'll have a great year. So if you don't have the patience to ride it out, if you need that quick success, then this might not be the game for them. But if they're around the animals and they get that real good feeling in their heart, then this is the place for them.
Thoroughbred racing is special for a lot of reasons. For some people, it's taken them places they never thought they'd go and given them thrills they never thought they would experience. Every owner dreams of going to the Derby. Some have gotten there. Others have won it. Listen to what it's like. It's an experience like no other.
You know, I think going to the Kentucky Derby 2 years in a row with 2 homebred horses out of West Virginia, just amazing. But it can happen. I mean, that's the thing. I don't know what the odds are on something like that. I think they're probably very long. But to have 2 horses of that caliber going to the Kentucky Derby in successive years, it's unbelievable. Just not to be even described, but to be felt and experienced. It's just like making the walk the second time around with Afternoon Delights, making the walk. Because I heard about it, and I asked Mandela if I could do it. Walking from the backside, coming over for the big race. And it was funny because Afternoon Delight's very fractious and kind of like really acting up, and Dixie. And people were calling to me and yelling, "Bird, Bird," and singing my songs. And Dick said, "Can you walk like 15 steps behind?" walk away from the horse so you're not upsetting it. The biggest thrill was losing in Dubai and almost beating Cigar. And it'd go that far and be in the middle of nowhere in another world and have this just chilling race and almost beating Cigar. So even though we finished second, we didn't win the race. It was still the race.
We've had an incredible number of memorable moments. I think one of the most memorable and has to rank at the very top is having this year won the Kentucky Derby, and to then have experienced winning the Preakness and going for the Triple Crown. Why, that certainly has to rank at the very top. But then in addition to Silver Charm, we've been blessed with such good fortune. We had a partnership with William T. Young of Overbrook Farm and Graham Beck of Gainesway Farm, and that was really the first champion that we have had. We won the Preakness with Timber Country, ran third in the Kentucky Derby, and on numerous other occasions he performed in an outstanding manner, and that was a very meaningful and worthwhile partnership. And then we were fortunate enough to have Serena Song come along, and she ran 38 times in 30 months, and I just don't have to tell you what kind of a champion she proved to be. And then while that was all developing, we also fell heir to and had a great Stormcat colt come to us that we purchased in the Keeneland sales named Hennessy. And, of course, he's standing at stud now at Ashford Stud in Lexington, Kentucky, and has just been doing a magnificent job. And we look forward to his having many outstanding foals.
Well, this year's campaign with Free House really is a Cinderella story. I mean, we bred the horse, of course, and he's out of an unknown stallion, at least unknown at that point, Smokester, and it's just something that happens once in a lifetime, and we're just very happy it happened to us. It was a thrill like you'll never get.
Well, Secretariat has basically taken over my life. Beaver Ridge, as I say, was our first big breakthrough, and I thought that's probably all we're going to get. But of course, right the next year we had that big red horse, and I thought, well, gosh, this is the icing on the cake. We'll have another 2-year-old champion, and maybe he'll win the Derby. He went so far beyond all of those expectations, and certainly his 3-year-old year, 1973. I don't know what my children were doing. I don't know what my husband was doing. I was with those horses and loving it, and getting to know horse fans, and getting to know racetracks, and being wined and dined, and worrying about my horse. I became a tiger mother, that he had the best transportation and everything. He was my whole focus. And I thought it would be over after that. Well, not a bit. By the time he retired, I had 2 girls helping me answer fan mail. 25 years later, I still get fan mail. I still send out pictures. Well, I don't. I'm kind of out of pictures, but I tell them where they can buy pictures. I sign things at the racetrack. I'm simply known as Secretariat's mother, and it's a funny thing. There's sometimes when you don't feel like being a public person. And I used to think, oh, please don't. Oh, I hope that person doesn't. Oh, well, of course, yes, I'm Secretariat's mother, because they love him, and they can't talk to him. So they talk to me, and that's my job. I have to be his representative and share all the glorious things that he was with his fans.
I think it's the most exciting game in the world. We've been fortunate enough to have run in 4 Kentucky Derbies in the 90s, and I will tell you there is no experience like that. It's one of the great, great things. You do have to have the right temperament. You've got to walk through a lot of valleys before you get to the peaks, and you've got to be a person who doesn't brood about failures and that sort of thing. You've got to be able to look ahead, you've got to be resilient, and if you do have the right temperament, it is one of the most pleasurable things in all the world.